Welcome to the Breaking Up with Naive podcast, where it's not heartbreak, it's a rebrand. I'm your host, Dr. Becky Rollerson. This is a place where my friends and I share our stories of heartbreak in life, combined with our testimonies of how being a Christ follower led us to surviving the heartbreak and to rebuilding healthy lives. While the stories shared here are relevant and true, it is important to note that I am not a trained counselor, not a trained mental health counselor, nor someone who assesses mental health. If you feel that you need help in that area, I encourage you to please seek medical guidance. The testimonies shared here on this podcast are intended to encourage and inspire other women to be less naive when it comes to Satan's ugly ways. With that, welcome to today's episode of Breaking Up with Naive. Hello, listeners, and welcome to Breaking Up with Naive. It's not heartbreak, it's a rebrand. I am thrilled to be able to host today's guest, and today's topic is overcoming heartbreak and caring for elderly parents. And I know that I am at the age where my mom is still living, my dad has passed away, and my sisters did a fantastic job of helping when my dad was sick towards the end of his life. And they do a great job with caretaking for my mom. And so this topic is really exciting. And my guest today, while I have not known her necessarily my entire life, I definitely have been aware of her and knew she existed for my entire life. And we've really gotten an opportunity to get to know each other better in the last year and a half. And as she tells her story today, you'll understand why that relationship has shifted and we've been able to really share with each other a lot more in the last year and a half. But I do want to kind of lead in with giving some scripture. So in Exodus 20:12, Deuteronomy 5:16, Matthew 15:4, Matthew 19:19, and Mark 7:10 all indicate to honor thy father and mother in various ways. And this is something that I feel like our guest today definitely did for her mother. So I am excited to welcome Miss Angie Bailey to the conversation today. And Angie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Becky. I'm thrilled to be here. I am a 25-year Air Force veteran and am looking forward to ultimate retirement here soon. And grew up in Florida, similar to you, and am in the process of kind of doing some world traveling right now. And wanted to share my story with you because not to spoiler alert, but I think the listener is going to really enjoy putting the pieces together of how we're connected and also learn a little bit about just how hard it is to care for an aging parent.
Most definitely. So, Angie, you were telling me the other day just about your mom and how special she was. And so, why
Yeah,
don't you tell us a little bit about her?
I will. She was a Florida State Seminole.
Okay.
Uh-huh. So I know that
Hmm.
make a lot of your listeners excited.
I can be
Um,
nice to the garnet and gold.
well, she and her brother, Bo, sure did enjoy jabbing at each other over the years because he was a Gator fan and she's a Seminole fan. And so that's how I was raised, is with that juxtaposition in my family. But it was always in good fun and much love. So Mama grew up in the same town you did, and she went off to FSU. She got her MRS and married my dad after a year. And they started a family, ended up with 3 boys and a girl, and I was the baby. And it was not always wonderful and easy. Daddy came back from World War II with some hidden demons that nobody really knew about, and he was
Mm,
self-medicated.
yeah.
And so they got divorced after my 2 older brothers left home, and mom remarried, and we started kind of another family. And she enjoyed that marriage for 17 years until he passed away. And then after that, I want to say it was right before she turned 60, she entered this phase of her life where she was thoroughly independent. She was retired and she had just enough money to have a comfortable life. And she was really discovering who she was. She enjoyed fishing, she enjoyed walking and taking care of herself. She cooked clean, she enjoyed traveling. She met up with a childhood friend that she'd known her whole life, and they dated for the
Oh,
rest of
wow.
her life.
Wow.
Yeah, and, he's a good old bona fide boy too,
Okay.
and that was a real sweet relationship. I'm sorry, I said for the rest of her life. I meant to say for the rest of his life. Unfortunately, he passed away about 9 years after they started seeing each other. And right before that, we lost my other brother, Lee. He was 3 years older than me. We lost him to esophageal cancer in 1997.
Mm.
And I think that's when we started noticing there was something different about mom. I want to believe that was the intensity of the grief that she was suffering that maybe
I believe that,
kind
sure.
of exacerbated the situation. And, we didn't really notice too much. She was aging, right? Like everybody does. But it was right after 9/11 and after Lawrence's death that I noticed a difference in her speech. She lived in Fort Walton Beach. And right after 9/11, Hurlburt Field, and the special ops forces there
Right.
ripped out of there and deployed to Afghanistan. And so they did it in the middle of the night. And so AC-130 gunships were blazing the sky open. She called me at 2 a.m. and she was terrified. And she said, Angie, I'm scary. I said,
Oh,
"What, mama?" And she said, "I'm scary." And I realized that she meant to say scared, but she didn't understand that she had made a mistake.
right.
And
Didn't
granted, it was
understand
in
the
the
wrong word, right.
right, and it was in the middle of the night, and she was scared, but that stuck with me, like, something's just not quite right. And she kept joking along the way, "If I ever get that Old-timers, I've been talking to my doctor about it, and he says, Betty Jean, if you think you have it, you don't have it." And so that wasn't super helpful as it turns out, but that was kind of the medical advice she was given at the time.
Okay.
And she lived alone. The rest of the three of us didn't live there anymore. And so, we'd talk to her on the phone, we'd have visits with her, and there were some changes that we recognized, but nothing that seemed terribly out of what you should expect for normal aging. Until about 2004, I got a phone call from her and she said, Angie, I just got in a car wreck and I walked home. And I was like,
What?
"What?
Yeah.
What?" And I panicked and I thought, "Okay, who do I still know in town?" And I called a friend of hers and I asked her, "Can you please go check on her mom?" She had been in a car wreck. She had totaled her car, wrapped it around, pulled out in front of a car, got hit, and the car got wrapped around a telephone pole.
Oh
It's a
gosh.
miracle she lived. And then I really still don't know if she walked home or if the police officer gave her a ride home. She was so rattled. But that's when me and my brothers decided, okay, this is the sign that she probably shouldn't be driving and that she probably shouldn't be living alone. So we came up with a plan to help her sell her house and move to Alabama, where my oldest brother lived. And she stayed there. We moved her up there and she lived there for about 18 months. It was a cute little townhouse and she had it decorated just so cute. And she seemed real happy, but it wasn't very long before things started changing. Her behavior really took a turn. She was like hyper focused on keys
Oh,
and she, immediately what Alzheimer's can do to some people is turn you into a real paranoid person,
I could see
very
that.
fearful. Yes, and so what it did with her is if she misplaced her keys, she immediately thought somebody stole them,
Oh,
and she called the locksmith probably 10 times in the 18 months that she lived in that house and changed her keys. So that was something that we took note of is the key thing was really important to her and terrifying when she couldn't find them. That's probably a control thing, but so anyway, we tried to do the best we could. I was actually deployed to Iraq during this time, and my brother would call me, "Mom's blah 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 blah," and I'm like, "Oh, what do you want me to do about it?"
yeah, how are you
He
gonna do
said,
anything about that, right?
that's right, that's right. So it was a stressful time, but when I got home, we recognized that there was a facility in San Antonio where I lived at the time that would allow retired military officers and their spouses to live there independently all the way through end of life care. And so we got her on the waiting list. And then in that 4 months that we were waiting, she called the police one night when she was living in Alabama and said, "My son's trying to kill me." And they picked her up and took her to a battered woman's shelter. And
Oh,
that's when we
wow.
recognized that the situation was so bad that she couldn't stay by herself anymore. And disclaimer, my brother loved her and took very good care of her. But oftentimes, Alzheimer's patients find somebody in their life that can be a boogeyman
No, right,
who's
right.
who like any bad thing that happens, it was them. It was their fault. They did it. And so between my brother and his wife, they were the boogeyman, which is unfortunate because they were also her caregivers. So
Right.
my other brother swooped in, picked her up, brought her to San Antonio, where she lived with me for a little while before we got her into Air Force Village. And we got her moved in, beautiful little apartment, 12th floor. She had a view for forever. And she did okay living by herself for a while. The staff would call me and say, "Your mother is, she's lost her keys again, or thinks something's happening that's not really happening." And so we worked through that a little bit, but a pattern started to develop where she would call me almost every single day. And fortunately, I worked just about 5 miles from the place she lived. And she would say, "Angie, somebody stole my wallet." So her wallet was almost as important to her as her keys were, because in her wallet, she kept the printed out copy of her bank statement.
Oh,
And
wow.
that was very precious to her. She felt like if
Almost
she could hold that in her hands, then she
almost
was
like
safe.
maybe she had had some kind of financial trauma and it was kind of coming back in this stage of her health.
Exactly, exactly. And so, I would do this routinely, like every day, every other day, several times a week. And one day I had a full-time job, right? And I had a family, and my husband at the time was of course supportive, but this wasn't his mother. And so he wasn't doing all the fixing like I was. And so I was driving home from work one day after finding her wallet, because every time I'd go over there, I'd open a drawer or cabinet and I'd find it every time. So what I believe was happening is what they call sundowning. So they start to lose a little bit of clarity toward the end of about 5 p.m. when the sun goes down. And so with her, she went right to bed. So she was going to bed at 5 o'clock at night. She would wake up in the middle of the night in a panic about her wallet,
About
thinking
her
somebody's
wallet.
trying to steal it.
Yeah.
She'd hide it and then wake up in the morning and not remember any of it and
Wow.
can't find her wallet. And so thus the panic. So this one particular day, it was really at the end of my rope. I had just been on this hamster wheel running as fast as I could. And on the way home, I was crying my eyes out and just praying to God, "Please send me somebody who can help me. I need, I'm not like I'm trying to tell God what I need, like he
Mhm.
doesn't already know." But I was
I think
like,
he still expects us to voice it though. Like I think
yes,
he wants us to ask him. Like that's
yeah.
what part of that relationship is asking him. So that was definitely the right thing to be doing.
It was, but I had, like, my own idea of who it should be. My nieces were both just out of college at that time, and I thought, and then they weren't married, hadn't started their families yet, and I'm like, send me those girls," and I got home and went about my life, and it wasn't 2 weeks later that I got a call from my cousin, whose husband was in the Army, and she said, "We had orders to Wichita Falls, and they just got changed to San Antonio." And I could not believe what I was hearing.
Wow.
And it gets better, because not only did she love my mother, but she was also a hospice nurse that specialized in elder care. I could not have planned it. I could not have imagined it any better than it actually was, because it was all I needed. And who was my cousin?
So this might be a little emotional for me, but Angie, this like I've always said, even in my story, that God answers prayers in the way that we're not expecting him to. And I don't know why every time we go through a heartbreak that we don't really believe that. It's like we doubt it all over again and have to reassure ourselves. And I know you were in a season of brokenness seeing this happen to your independent mom, but your cousin was my best friend Candy, who I ended up giving a kidney to, who ended up passing away a year and a half ago. But I remember all this, and I remember Candy talking about her cousin Angie and her cousin Angie's mom. And so tell us what happened from that point on.
Well, one of the things that I had tried to do with mom prior to Candy's arrival was I worked with a couple of people that I knew that were nurse practitioners or in the business somehow that weren't fully working or, were looking for extra gigs. And I have them come and spend time with my mom like a social worker kind of thing, just because I couldn't be there because I had to work. And so when Candy arrived, she had just adopted a beautiful baby girl, and that little child was so precious, and Candy was fortunate enough to not have to work at that time. And so I asked her if she could please spend some of those days visiting my mom, and of course, she
And
was
she
thrilled to
did.
do it.
She
And
did.
she and that baby girl were like medicine to my mom because she was my mama's baby brother's daughter, and we had lost him about 5 years before. And
Mhm.
so for my mom, who loved candy, I mean, she so loved candy.
I mean, let's be honest, who didn't love candy?
Exactly, exactly. But for Candy, she told me more times, so many times, that when she looked into my mom's blue eyes, she said it was like looking into her daddy's eyes, and that
Yes.
it helped heal her.
Mhm.
So we all got what we needed. And it was in such an unexpected way and such a beautiful thing, not just for the caring of my mother, but for myself. Because Candy and I forged a relationship because I was about 15 years older than her. So she was just a little kid when, I was a teenager and all cool and, loved her, but we didn't really have much time growing up together because I was so much older than her. But this time was so special and precious. And just having her love on my mom and allowing Hannah to be just a little baby. And people with Alzheimer's, sometimes they lose their ability to speak. And mom was losing her ability to speak. And she would play patty cake with the baby and make faces and all those kind of things because baby couldn't speak yet. And so
Right.
all those things that they could do together. And it was just such a precious time.
And again, I don't believe any of that just happened. That wasn't just a happenstance. That was
Yeah.
definitely orchestrated by the Lord. He knew exactly what you needed. He knew what Candy needed. And the fact that Candy's husband got orders to San Antonio, even though it was supposed to have been Wichita Falls. I mean, it was just the whole thing was just collaborated so perfectly. And then there was an ending that was also orchestrated perfectly by the Lord. Tell us about that.
Yes. So mom was in decline. She had had an accident. She hit her head and she recovered from it, but it wasn't a full recovery. And so she was declining pretty quickly. And Travis got orders again for another assignment, and they left 2 weeks before she died. So God gave me exactly what I needed for exactly as long as I needed it. And it still is the miracle of my life.
I just love this. And again, there's heartbreak and watching your mom go through this, there's heartbreak and the sacrifice that you're having to make as her daughter, and even with your brothers trying to figure things out. And then the Lord just comes along and says, no, 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 Angie, I got you. I've got you. I've got all of you. And to me, that's what's so beautiful in it. So when you think about that story, where did you see Satan's lies? Because, Satan's going to throw darts at you to make you doubt what the Lord has planned. Where did you see some of those lies at?
Well, I saw these for quite a while, even after her death, in that eh, you know, bless their hearts. People with Alzheimer's have all kinds of strange realities, but they are their realities. And what I didn't know, because I didn't have really a lot of informed support, I'll call it that. Every time she said something crazy, like the man next door to me in the apartment next door is trying to break into my apartment through my microwave.
Yeah.
She really thought that was a thing that was happening. And I was so many emotions going on, like, oh my gosh, what has happened to my mother? This isn't the reality. I have to fix it. Right. Mom, no, that's not happening. Every time I would try to fix her reality, it caused her distress, and it
Oh,
caused her, it varied between anger, fear, picking a negative emotion, and she felt those things.
right.
And
And you were
I
just
did.
being realistic, thinking like, "No, mom, that's not what's happening."
Right. And what I realized over time, unfortunately, after her passing, was that when people, your loved ones, are going through this, you let them have that reality. If they say, "Why is the sky green today?" You say, "I don't know, but isn't it a pretty color?" You just and also redirect, right? If it's something that's getting them agitated, just redirect. They won't remember it. And the other thing is if they're telling you this outlandish story, go along with it. Don't fear that, oh gosh, what happens tomorrow when have to act like this is really the truth, because they won't remember it.
They won't remember.
They
Yeah.
won't remember it. So just let them have whatever's agitating, whatever their strange reality is, just go with it. I would also recommend that seek a support group. I
Go.
I
Yep.
didn't do that, and I should have done that. I really didn't have the time to do it. I should have made the time to do it. But when you're in a support group, they're going to be led by a mental health professional who can help you understand how to navigate these things.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a great segue just to remind all of our listeners that neither one of us are mental health counselors or licensed or certified in that way. So if you or a family member does need medical care or mental health counseling, I would encourage people to seek that kind of licensed counseling and therapy. So, I have a lot of friends that have aging parents, some of them pretty good friends who are doing a lot of caretaking and lovingly so, and I very much admire them because they're having to caretake much like you did in a whole different kind of way. So, let's just kind of close it out with a few final tips for, granted your mom had Alzheimer's, but just aging parents. What kind of advice do you have for overcoming the heartbreak of that?
Well, prayer, because it
Yeah,
works, I promise you.
it does
Um,
work
that
every
that
time.
was the thing that bailed me out for sure. But one of the other things that I would really recommend is that, they say it every time you get on an airplane, you've got to put your oxygen mask on before you can put it on somebody else. If you have an empty tank, you don't have anything to give that person that you're caring for.
Great point.
So please, 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 self-care is hugely important if you're in that situation where you're caring for an aging parent.
I 100% agree with that. And there's a lot of situations, even with the grieving that comes afterward, where self care is super important. And in your situation, you're kind of grieving as you go to a
Yeah.
certain extent. So that looks different. Well, Angie, I just love the fact that we are able to have this friendship now. And hopefully, I'm going to be able to travel across the big pond and come see you in 2026, which will
I
be a
love
great
it.
opportunity. But I know that was something Candy had planned to do. So I'm excited to get to do it for several different reasons. But I just appreciate your friendship. I appreciate the way that you have supported me through my grief and losing my childhood best friend. But I also appreciate that Candy was who she was and that she loved both of us enough. And I think we both missed that because she loved both of us enough to care for us in very unique ways. And the Lord gave her a skill set and a mindset and her own set of heartbreak experiences in life to really be able to turn around and use those to improve the quality of my life and your life. And
Absolutely.
I just appreciate that. So, with that, listeners, thank you so much. I hope you were able to get something out of this. And until next time. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Breaking Up with Naive. It's not a heartbreak, it's a rebrand.